Ever walked past your favorite coffee shop and like seen the price went up
Yeah.
and thought, yeah, I think I'll just make my own today?
Yeah.
Or maybe you've wondered how streaming services can just keep bundling those subscriptions and raising prices.
Right.
We're going to crack the code on those head scratchers with today's deep dive.
Okay.
It's all about elasticity.
Elasticity. What's fascinating about it, to me, is how it explains, like, how sensitive buyers and sellers are to price changes.
Okay.
Because it's not just, will they buy less if it's more expensive?
Right.
It's how much CH less.
Okay. So like a sensitivity meter for the economy.
Exactly.
I like it. We're using chapter 5 of this economics textbook to guide us today. And it all starts with, something pretty relatable. What happens when the price of something you buy regularly changes?
Well, the textbook uses the example of gasoline.
Right.
And we know that people will drive less if gas prices skyrocket.
Right.
But elasticity lets us put a number on exactly how much less. It helps us understand the degree of that reaction.
So not just IF people react, but like how big of a deal it is to them.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
It quantifies it for us.
The book talks about these different, flavors of demand elasticity.
Yeah.
Let's start with just straight up elastic demand. What does that even mean?
So imagine a rubber band. Very stretchy,
Okay.
very responsive. That's elastic demand. Even a small price increase makes demand significantly drop.
Okay.
Think about a luxury car.
Yeah.
If the price jumps up too high, suddenly other nice cars, or even just like taking the bus, starts to seem a lot more appealing.
Yeah, you start to reconsider your whole plan if the price is just
Yeah.
too high. Okay.
Your willingness to pay has gone down.
So if the price makes you reconsider, that's kind of a sign of elastic demand.
Right.
The textbook gave the example of butter versus margarine.
Right.
Small price increase on butter and everyone's buying margarine.
Exactly. Good substitute.
Yeah. But how does this play out in the real world beyond, me at the grocery store?
Yeah, but this is where it gets really interesting for businesses. So let's say you're that coffee shop owner.
Okay.
If you know your customers are really sensitive to the price of your lattes, you might actually make more money by lowering your prices a bit.
Wait. Lower prices equals more money? What's that math?
Because with elastic demand, that lower price could bring in a huge wave of new customers.
Okay.
You might make a little less profit per cup, but you're selling way more.
Oh, okay.
So overall, you're making more.
Mind blown.
Yeah.
It's counterintuitive, but it's kind of brilliant.
It is.
All right, so that's elastic. What about when demand is inelastic?
Inelastic demand, think of it like a stiff rope.
Okay.
You can try and stretch it, but it's not going to move much.
Right.
Price changes don't really move the needle on demand.
Okay, so things you absolutely need no matter the cost.
Yeah, like going to the doctor. We all need to go to the doctor,
Right, yeah. Even if it gets more
expensive.
yeah.
The textbook also mentioned addictive substances, which is a much heavier example, but
Yeah.
the demand there, sadly, tends to stay high even if the prices increase.
Yeah, because you need it.
Right.
Yeah,
And that,
fortunately.
yeah, and that actually highlights why understanding elasticity is so crucial.
Okay,
It reveals a lot about the relationship between those buyers and sellers.
okay,
With inelastic demand, businesses have a little more leverage.
okay.
They can raise prices without seeing a huge drop in sales because consumers aren't as sensitive to those changes.
Right, because you kind of need it, so.
Oh,
Right,
okay.
you gotta have it. So elasticity can, make or break a business then.
Yeah.
But here's something I thought was fascinating in the textbook. It's not just about, how many dollars the price changes. It's the percentage change.
Yeah.
That's a key aha moment.
And think about it this way. A $1 increase on a $2 item is huge.
Right.
It's a 50% jump.
Yeah.
But that same dollar increase on a $100 item,
Yeah, you're not going to notice.
no, not at all.
Okay.
Not going to change anyone's mind.
It's all relative. The textbook uses the example of ice cream.
Yep.
Small price hike might not, deter you from a single scoop.
Right.
But would you buy a whole pint of your favorite flavor if it was suddenly, 30% more?
Right? Maybe not.
Probably not.
It all depends on that percentage change.
Oh, okay.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to how elasticity plays out in the real world.
Okay, so we've got the basics of elasticity down.
Right.
But now I kind of want to see it in action. Because this isn't just some, abstract econ concept. This stuff is playing out in industries around us every day.
Absolutely. And the textbook uses a really interesting example from agriculture to illustrate this point.
Okay.
Let's talk about wheat.
Okay.
Imagine scientists develop this new super wheat.
Okay.
It boosts yields by like 20%.
Okay, so more wheat, more money. That's what I would think.
Right. It seems like it would be a win for farmers, right?
Yeah.
Not so fast.
Okay.
Because this is where understanding elasticity is so crucial.
Okay.
See, people need to eat, right?
Right.
A certain amount.
Hmm.
So demand for like a staple crop like wheat
Yeah.
is usually pretty inelastic.
Right, because we're not suddenly going to eat more bread just because there's more wheat.
Exactly.
Okay, so more wheat doesn't equal more demand.
Right. And this is where it gets tricky for the farmers.
Okay.
Because this increase in supply could actually cause the price of wheat to plummet.
Right.
And because the demand is inelastic, that price drop doesn't mean a huge surge in sales to compensate.
Right. Right.
So the farmers actually end up making less, even though they're producing more.
Wow. Talk about a paradox. Like
Yeah.
better tech, more wheat,
Right.
less income, potentially.
Yeah.
It kind of makes you understand why, like, the number of farmers has been shrinking for decades.
It's a complex issue with many factors, but this dynamic between supply, demand, and elasticity in agriculture is definitely
Right.
part of it.
Yeah, it's kind of mind-blowing. And the book even mentions that sometimes, like, governments will pay farmers not to plant certain crops,
Right.
which seems completely counterintuitive.
It might seem strange, like on the surface,
Right.
but it actually makes sense from an economic standpoint.
Okay.
By limiting supply, these programs try to prevent those price crashes
Oh,
and kind of keep farmers' income a bit more stable.
interesting. Fascinating stuff. Okay, so we've talked about food, but what about something with a little bit more, I don't know, volatility?
Okay.
The textbook talks about OPEC and global oil prices.
Right.
Talk about a roller coaster.
Oh, absolutely. OPEC, the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, has a history of, really trying to flex its muscles in the oil market.
Right.
They use production cuts to try and control those prices.
Yeah.
It's a perfect example of how elasticity can play out over different time frames.
Yeah. And the book talked about that.
Yeah.
Short run versus long run elasticity.
Yeah.
Right.
What's the difference?
So think of it like this. In the short run, both supply and demand for oil tend to be really inelastic
Okay.
because you can't just create a new oil field overnight, right?
Right, yeah.
It takes time to, discover, extract, refine.
Mm.
And then on the demand side, people need their cars.
Yeah.
They need to fuel their planes, hit their homes. You can't just suddenly switch to alternatives overnight when prices spike.
Right. So OPEC saw that inelastic demand and thought, okay, cut production, drive up prices,
Right.
make a fortune.
Exactly. And, in the short term, it worked.
Right.
Those production cuts, combined with that inelastic demand, led to some pretty huge oil price shocks that we all remember.
Right, yeah, back
Yeah.
in the day.
Yeah.
But like any magic trick, eventually the illusion wears off.
Right. So what happened?
Well, over the long term, elasticity comes into play.
Okay.
So remember how I said you can't just like magic up an oil field?
Right. Yeah.
Right. You give it a few years of these really high oil prices, and suddenly it becomes very, very worth it for companies to invest in finding and producing more oil.
Okay.
So we start to see new players enter the market. Existing players ramp up production.
Okay.
Supply becomes more elastic.
Okay. And then on the other side, the demand side, people start adjusting too.
Of course, people start to buy more fuel-efficient cars, start carpooling, maybe use public transportation more.
Right.
And then these changes, plus, the development of things like alternative energy sources, start to make that demand side more elastic as well.
Okay. So OPEC's grip on those prices loosens, which explains why those wild swings in oil prices eventually calm down.
Exactly. Elasticity is kind of a long game.
Right. Okay, so we've covered food and fuel, but can elasticity shed light on things with even bigger social impacts?
Sure.
The textbook kind of got me thinking about the war on drugs.
Okay, now you're thinking like an economist.
Right.
Because typically we focus on the supply side,
Right.
stopping drugs from entering the country.
Right, yeah.
But what if we actually looked at it through the lens of demand
Okay.
and its elasticity?
Okay, I'm intrigued. Explain it to me.
So imagine a graph like the ones in the textbook,
Okay.
showing the market for, we'll just say, a particular drug.
Okay.
The government's goal with interdiction is to shift that supply curve,
Okay.
reduce the amount of drugs available.
Okay, so less supply, less drug use. Makes sense to me.
Right. In a perfect world, maybe.
Okay.
But here's where that elasticity throws a wrench in the plan.
Okay.
Demand for addictive substances is often very, very inelastic, at least in the short run.
Right.
So even if you manage to raise the price by restricting that supply,
Right.
that demand doesn't necessarily drop as much as you'd hope.
Right, because if someone's already addicted, like a higher price isn't going to change their
It's behavioral.
right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And here's the potential downside.
Okay.
When you have that inelastic demand, but you do manage to reduce the supply,
Okay.
you could actually increase the total amount of money being spent on the drug
Oh.
because the prices are higher.
Right.
People are still buying, just at a higher cost.
Yeah. Right. So it's like backfiring almost.
It can.
Wow. Okay.
And this can lead to more crime as people resort to desperate measures to afford their habits.
Right. Because they need it.
Exactly.
Okay. So does that mean trying to reduce the supply is completely pointless?
No, not necessarily. Interdiction efforts can still disrupt the market.
Okay.
They can make it riskier for suppliers
Okay.
and maybe even have some impact on demand eventually.
Okay.
But I think the key takeaway here is that we can't just ignore the demand side of the equation.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So it's more complex than just let's get rid of all the drugs,
Exactly.
which, I mean, I think we all kind of knew that, but
Right.
it's interesting to see how elasticity plays into it.
Absolutely.
So we've seen how this like elasticity thing plays into everything from price of a loaf of bread to like global issues like the war on drugs. But
Right.
how does this all connect back to like you and me
Right,
in
right.
our everyday lives?
Well, that's the beauty of it. Elasticity isn't just for like economists and policymakers.
Right.
It's a really powerful lens for just understanding how the world works.
Okay.
Everything from those everyday choices we make at the store to those big economic trends we see playing out on the news.
Okay. So like next time I'm at the grocery store and I'm like agonizing over the price of, I don't know, olive oil,
Right.
I should be thinking about elasticity.
Exactly. Ask yourself, how essential is this particular olive oil to me?
Right.
Are there other brands that I'd be just as happy with? How much would a price change actually affect my decision to buy it?
So if I can easily find another brand at a better price and I'm not like picky about my olive oil,
Right.
then that's a sign that my demand is probably more elastic
Right.
and I'm more likely to be like swayed by that price difference.
Exactly. You got it.
Okay.
And it's not just about groceries either.
Right.
Think about housing costs in different cities.
Okay.
If the rent goes up in a city with lots of available apartments, people might just move.
Right.
That's elastic demand.
Okay.
But if that same rent increase happens in a city with very limited housing options,
Right.
people might have no choice but to kind of stay put.
Right.
So that's inelastic demand in action.
Wow. I never thought about it that way, but that
Yeah.
makes so much sense. It's like elasticity gives you like X-ray vision into like the hidden forces that are shaping the world around us.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And in a world that's constantly bombarding us with information, having these mental models, these frameworks for understanding these complex systems is more important than ever.
Yeah. Like you said earlier, it helps us like see beyond the surface,
Wow.
to think critically, maybe make better decisions. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling strangely empowered right now.
As you should. Knowledge is power, and understanding elasticity. That's a superpower in disguise.
I love that. A superpower that helps us understand everything from like the price of our coffee to global economics.
Yes.
That's pretty cool. Well, that's about all the time we have for today's deep dive on elasticity. We hope you found it insightful and maybe even a little bit empowering. Until next time.